Hello, everyone. This is Woman on the Move Book Club, and it is Thursday, March the 13th. The year is 2025, and we have another phenomenal historical fiction book to discuss. But we'll first start with introductions. I'm Cindy, and I'm going to introduce one of our other members, Harriet. She's going to wave. There you go. There's Harriet. All right, go ahead.
I'm Angie.
I'm Linda.
Odella, you're muted.
I'm Sam.
Sorry, I'm Odella.
I'm Sam.
I'm Vivian.
I'm Sadie.
Awesome. So these are the ladies you have this evening. A few are missing in action for other reasons, but we are going to have a phenomenal book club. And I'm going to turn it over to our host, Linda. She will introduce the title of the book, the author, and she's hosting the book club. So she'll take it from here.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. The name of the book that I selected for the members to read is called Mr. Churchill's Secretary, and it's a historical fiction book by Susan Ella Macneal, and this was her very first book in this particular series. And this story takes place in the early days of World War II in Great Britain. The author was inspired to write this novel after visiting the cabinet war rooms in London. And during a self-guided tour while she was listening, she was inspired to write the novel by listening to a memoir of Elizabeth Leighton Neal, who was actually one of Winston Churchill's secretary, who was the prime minister during World War II, that this story takes place. That particular memoir and extensive research, and if you read the book, you can tell that she did a lot of research, help her to shape the main character of the book, Maggie Hope, and the very story itself, okay? Maggie Hope is the main character. She was born in England, but she was raised in the United States. At the start of the war, she was in England to take care of an inheritance property that her paternal grandmother had left her. Maggie obtained a very important job working for Winston Churchill as a typist. And the story has three different, I call them subplots, including those working to ensure England survived the early part of this war, those working to destroy England, and personal stories focusing on various social issues, including equality, life-changing secrets. The book is very, very popular. There's 11 books in this, we call it the Maggie Hope series. There's a total of 11 books. The latest one is called The Last Hope, was written in 2024. So if you like the first one, continue to read the series. It gets better and better and better. Okay, let's go ahead and start off with a couple of questions about the book from my members. My first question is, identify some of the inequalities as a result of the time period or the culture shown in the book that affected certain characters.
I think for me, it was the inequality of women. This book in particular reminded me of Hidden Figures and all of the trials that those women went through. It seems to be a universal theme with women. Some of the trials that they have to endure just to be as they have to prove they're as good as men and even better than men to get the job. And Maggie shined brightly and did that exceptionally well.
And even if they can do the job, they don't get credit for the job. So
Exactly.
Right.
She never really got credit for all that she was able to bring to shed light on the things that were going on that she was figuring out. It was really frustrating.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was very interesting how some of the women even had doctoral degrees at different levels of higher education, but still were marginalized and ended up having to take jobs that were not commensurate with their education. And there were men who had less education and had higher paying jobs because they still had that mindset of, it's the woman in the kitchen and all of that. So that was very interesting how they had to deal with those things.
Exactly. And something else too, isn't it interesting how women can keep other women down when they get into a position, a little bit of authority? So the woman who was Maggie's supervisor, I mean, she was guilty of it too. So it's like they get that position, and then it always seems like a person in power wants to be over other people and make them feel less than.
Yeah, you almost
Exactly.
wonder if that's part of their credibility with men, is that they want to show that they can put down somebody else too.
Right.
Thought that too.
And I was
Okay.
amazed that the secretary position was a man's position at that time.
Yes.
Exactly.
There, and women, they didn't think women could handle it, So I was surprised about that.
I think that was traditional. I mean, that's why
Correct.
in government, like the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of
Right,
all that, because those were men's positions of authority.
right.
Yeah. I thought that talking about getting dressed up to go out, it was nice that I mean, there was just everything from gloves to nylons to hats to everything for just simply going out.
Mhm.
It was a sign of the times.
Exactly,
Yes.
because we surely have lost that. It's almost no place that you can go now. You can go to a really nice, you feel like you're at a swanky restaurant, and somebody still has on jeans and tennis shoes. So
That's right.
unless the establishment has a dress code, which most of them don't anymore, we've pretty much gotten away from that. You know how country clubs used to be, a gentleman had to have a jacket on. And if they brought someone who didn't have a jacket on, because members knew, but if somebody came who didn't have a jacket on, they'd have a jacket for that person to
For them,
borrow
yes.
while they were there.
Shoot,
All right.
parents
I
come in their
remember-
PJs to school to drop off their kids.
Thank you. Walk down the
Right.
street in their PJs.
Yeah.
Okay, what other characters in the book was affected by some of the inequalities of that time period? I'm thinking in particular of David.
Well,
Yeah.
Yes, because of his preference,
Exactly.
his
Yeah.
ginger preference.
And
So
and
he
her
was
aunt as
definitely-
well.
And her aunt, and Annie Edith.
Yes,
Mhm.
and her aunt, exactly.
Okay. So,
nationality. That was
did you say
also,
nationality?
another thing they thought. Nationality, yes.
Between like the
Because
Irish,
even
the
though-
German,
Right, and her being an American too.
the American,
They
right?
would say something about her that wasn't seen quite kosher somehow.
Yeah, when she made a mistake because she made when she was typing and made a mistake, they blamed because she's American.
Right, yes.
Yes.
They kind of made a joke of her that,
Mhm.
even as an American, so she was, yeah.
Good catch, Odella. Yes.
Okay. All right. What is your impression of Aunt Edith, especially the way she raised Hope? Remember,
I think
Hope
she
was
did a good-
orphan, and her aunt raised her, and she chose to come to America with her and raise her here.
I think she did a good job of raising her. However, for me, I think she should have told her that her father was still alive. I would have told her. I think that secret did not help her, and especially when she found out that he really was alive, that
Yeah,
impacted her greatly.
I do think too that the family secrets really kept Maggie from having a relationship with her father, and she had so much bitterness built up toward him at first. And then it wasn't until she saw that he would give his life for her, or, that she did really matter to him. But she had that feeling her whole life that her dad didn't, she thought he was dead, but then when she found out he was alive, she had such a bitterness because she thought he didn't care enough to come and love me enough to come and find me. And so I think that was a big part of it too. Those secrets, those family secrets.
But you know,
Okay.
she was more angry at him than she was at her aunt.
Mhm.
Oh
Correct.
yes, that's what I'm saying. She was angrier at him than
Yes.
her because she felt like even if her aunt kept the secret, he should have, went through hell and high water still to find her.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
So you guys are
Aunt
touching on my question number 10 about secrets. So we'll continue on that venue. But I do want to go back to the way Aunt Edith raised Maggie. And one thing in the book that it says Edith, she drilled into Maggie to focus on degree and career and she'd be free. That's one of the quotes from the book. Do
Right.
you think this worked out for Edith and did it work out for Maggie? Not only did she drill it into Maggie, but I think she applied it to her own life to focus on a degree and a career and she'll be free. Was Edith free? Was Maggie free?
Well, considering the cultural restraints, they had a little bit more than maybe other people did in that
Yes.
sense. They had a
Right.
sense of themselves. Because I kind of felt that Edith, I mean, she didn't even tell her that the grandmother was still alive, you know.
Right.
So she went 20 years without knowing that she had a grandmother still alive in England. But I thought it was kind of like Edith's only chance to have a family that she created, that,
Mhm.
she took Maggie and moved. That was her chance to have something, and that's what it seemed like to me, right or wrong. She tried to give her what she probably felt that she needed when she was growing up, because she was a bright woman too,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I think it was selfishness on the aunt's part, but still from a place of protection and love.
And you know, something funny to me was the fact that the aunt kept her partner's relationship with her a secret, but Maggie knew it anyway. She was smart
Yeah.
enough to figure it out. And the
Yeah.
aunt thought she was keeping that a secret, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, I think another thing that came into play here that was mental health. The father had some mental health issues and he was grieving and didn't know how to cope with the death of his wife.
Right.
Correct.
And no one addressed that. No one addressed that at all with Maggie. So she was mad at him or
Mhm.
angry with him, not realizing that he really did have a mental health issue.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I guess the one thing that bothered me with all of her intellect, and certainly she was an educated woman, she was very naive. It was almost like the ostrich with his head in the sand. She didn't question a lot.
Yeah.
I think
It
that
took
was
her a couple years to go look for her father's and mother's grave.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think that was part
she'd
of the
been there.
time, the
Correct.
times then. You
Correct.
know, you were supposed to be the little wife, and stuff. You were not supposed to question men and stuff. So I think it was just that part of the
Right.
ages,
Right.
I thought Aunt Edith was always teaching her to be more, thoughtful. And it was just kind of strange that she never went to go look for those graves beforehand. When she even went back and found the house, and she started to connect with having that background in London. I couldn't figure out why it took her, because it had to be over a year
And I
to.
think her aunt didn't tell her stuff,
Right.
so kept her sheltered from the family stuff, so, she didn't have a reason to go look.
All right, so let's go on to another question. Let's talk about Mr. Snodgrass. This was one of Melody's favorite characters. Do you think sexism played a role in Mr. Snodgrass and John to a certain degree being dismissive of Maggie's health, both with the radar problem and when she tried to tell him about the German code being in the dress designs in the newspaper? Do you think sexism played a part in that?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Women
Nobody
were
expected her. No one expected her to be that smart,
right.
and that's why it was, I think, dismissed, because she wasn't supposed to be that smart to figure that kind of stuff out. And John thought he was the smartest person in the room.
Right.
Mhm.
How
And
could
if
she
he
be
didn't see
smarter
that
than him?
code, she didn't see that code.
Exactly. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Women weren't
Yeah.
supposed to know that stuff, you know.
And I think they kind of dismissed her too because of her age.
She was
Too young to
young.
be that smart.
Yes.
It seems that also her looks played a role in that too. If you're young, you're female, and you look good, you can't be smart.
Yes.
Or you can't be intelligent or super intelligent. So all of those things played against her.
Well, the looks open certain doors, but then they
Yes.
also
Correct.
closed other ones.
But they only
Yes.
opened them a crack.
Yeah, yeah. Or they only opened them for certain reasons. And
Yes.
yeah.
And also there was this undertone that somehow women are supposed to know their place.
For sure.
In fact, was it Mr. Snodgrass made the remark that women are just supposed to look pretty and have intelligent babies? Remember that in the book? So in view of knowing what he said at the beginning of the book and how he turned out at the end of the book, did your impressions of him change?
But I think Snodgrass knew all along her capabilities because, like he admitted in the end, he knew that she had the degree in math, and he knew that she had gone to a very high reputable school. So I think he knew of her capabilities, but he kept that all inside because of the time that they were living in and the expectations of women.
Well,
and he was trying to keep the secret of her father.
Yeah, he also knew who her father was. He knew her father was brilliant. And I couldn't really understand why they didn't want her in a position with Churchill because of her father. I couldn't figure out, I mean, why would they ever cross paths? I mean, because he had a code name too. I mean, the father did.
He was very important to the war effort.
Yeah, so I wasn't really clear on all that, on some of those things.
Was this possibly a way of protecting her?
And protecting the father
Protecting the father.
Protecting the father.
Because they needed the father. Because they thought that
because he was breaking the codes, the German codes. So they had to protect him.
So long as she didn't know where he was or who he was, then he was protected,
And so is she.
Correct. And that was their way too of keeping control over both of them.
Right. And they could have been afraid that he was fragile. If he saw her, he'd go back to the issues that he had when his wife died.
Exactly. Because he still wasn't, even when he's introduced to us, he's still not the most stable person emotionally.
But don't you think that was all an act?
That's what I was going to get at. He was
that
pretty conniving how he slipped that note to his daughter, and he had the confidence to know she was going to break that code.
That's right.
Yeah, he wasn't as crazy as they made him out to be.
He was crazy like a fox.
Okay, lady, there's a quote in the book. Math was elegant, logical, predictable, and preferable to the messy calculations of life. How does this statement allude to Maggie? Could it apply to any other character in the book? Remember, she was a potential PhD student at MIT. She had graduated from Wesley with the mathematical degrees, masters, and she was fluent in German and French, and I forgot some other language. So does this statement, if you think about it, math was elegant, logical, predictable, and preferable to the messy calculations of life. How would that apply to her?
I think that was her.
That was her?
That was her because she didn't want to deal with personal relationships. So,
much cleaner.
Yes.
And then when you look at the other characters who were acting on emotional motivations, their lives were much messier.
Yeah, and she was very logical.
Well, even her aunt, it applied to her also.
Oh, true.
It was always like her shield.
Yes, it's very clean, a good clean shield.
Yes, the way to keep herself protected. Because if you really think about it, she didn't have any real lasting relationships outside of her aunt. Not really.
Well, she went to college with Paige, and I mean, they met up because Paige was already there.
Right.
That didn't turn out well.
Right.
No. Okay. And speaking of Paige, were
Yeah.
you surprised by her deceit?
You know, I
No.
was waiting to
Yes.
find out who was a double agent because it says
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
something about it
Right.
on the
Yeah.
back.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I really thought it was David because
Mm-hmm.
how did she get that job in the, the one secretary's killed and then he keeps promoting her to be in that position. So I thought it was going to be David. So I was really surprised when it was
Yeah.
Paige.
But remember, Paige pushed
Paige
David to
recommended.
Right.
push
Right.
Maggie.
Maggie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So she always knew who Maggie was, I
Correct.
think, and
And,
she just
and she
needed
knew
to.
of her brilliance. And
Right.
she knew. So I was surprised it was Paige because when I read that, I was like,
Mhm.
but when you kind of
Or
look
when you,
back at the
yeah.
pattern, you see, oh, I can see how she was setting her up. But
Exactly.
that was remind me of a phrase we used to have growing up, talking about she was two-faced.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Because I
I would.
always was suspect. I knew something was going on with Paige, but I didn't know what it was. You know
Mm.
how there was just something that you
Mhm.
couldn't put
Mhm.
your finger on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that I glossed over that because she was working for Joseph Kennedy, and she quit
Yeah.
working for him because he wasn't. He was on the wrong side. He was pro-Nazi, so she quit work. I said, okay, so she's going to be pretty decent, and just this little
Mm-mm.
high society girl who likes to party, and here she has this double life, like you said, and I couldn't line it up. Well, why would she do this? But then they explain the
Why?
relationship of why
Mhm.
she was a sympathizer with this group.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Wasn't
but
that a shocker though? I mean,
yes,
how many people remember that the IRA was active in England at that time?
Right.
I wasn't. It sent me
yeah,
down a squirrel hole looking up all kinds of things like what was going on.
yeah,
You-
because you think of the IRA in like the 60s and 70s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what
Mhm.
I was thinking. But it was really interesting because I did look up all that information about the IRA at that time, and it did say that there were 5 IRA operatives that were blowing up things in Great Britain and kind of working with the Germans
Sure.
that were then
Mhm.
executed at the end of the war. Or
Mm.
collaborators with the Nazis. And I
Mhm.
thought, well, I didn't know that. You know.
Yeah, I found that to be interesting also. I
But
didn't know
you know
that.
what it also made me think is this is all about England trying to fight off Germany and the Nazis, and they didn't want the Nazis coming onto their island, but they did the same thing with Ireland. They had gone to their island, they took over their island, and it was 1919 or whatever it was when they took over Northern Ireland and annexed it on in 1921. And that's why IRA was fighting because they wanted to unify their island. So I wonder if she did that on purpose. It was kind of like a parallel good guy, bad guy things. Like who's really the good guy and the bad guy? And maybe humanity, we have both faces all the time. We're doing both all the time because on one side, Britain was the one who took over Ireland, but now they didn't want Germany to take over England. And we
Mm-hmm.
did that because that's what we learned in history. We learned all about that. So I thought that was a really interesting addition to the story, that whole
It
subline
was.
of,
Yeah.
of IRA.
But I understood Paige more once she told her
Her
story as
story.
to
Yes.
what
Exactly.
happened to her when she was growing up and why she was
Right.
taking the stand that she was taking, because she witnessed a lot of
Trauma.
things that a
Mhm.
child shouldn't have to see.
Right.
Done by British authorities.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm. So, speaking of Page, the book spoke about Joseph Kennedy's pro-Nazi support and then Page's deception. In your opinion, does these two factors cast the U.S. in a negative light? It was a small little segment talking about why they was hoping the U.S. would join the war to help fight,
Mhm.
because at this time England was basically fighting Germany by themselves. France had capitulated. Poland was gone. So they were like fighting for their lives and hoping somebody would come to their rescue. and they mentioned, I think maybe 2 or 3 times they mentioned Joseph Kennedy's role in the book. Do you view this as casting a negative light on the United States stand during World War II during this time period, or it's just a little note in the book to remind us of
I
Kennedy's
think
role?
at that time, though, weren't we separatists then? We
Mhm.
weren't really,
Isolation,
yeah,
living in isolation.
yeah.
Mhm.
So that all kind of just played into it to me. Because that's, we hadn't joined in with anybody.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I guess it also shows you that there are lots of differing opinions within a country too. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
not all united in everything.
Well, I know that at that time too, uh, Roosevelt's opinion was we're going to stay out of it as much as we can.
Right.
We'll send supports,
Mhm.
but as far as sending our troops and manpower, we're not going to do that. And really, the United States didn't get involved until after Pearl Harbor. And they were supporting European countries with, weapons and different things like that, and some intelligence, but actual getting involved, that didn't really come into play until after Pearl Harbor. And then it was just, Japan lit the fuse and it was on.
All right, let's talk about who was your favorite second character in the book? Your second character. I'm assuming Maggie was everybody's first, maybe.
I like David.
Mhm.
I was
I
going
like
to
I was going to say David too.
I like,
Yes.
yeah.
He
I
was
like
a
But I
good-
did like her father.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to hear why somebody liked David and why someone liked the father.
Well, David was a true friend, and he didn't question her to the point of denying her when she asked him to go with her to look for her parents' grave. He asked why, but it wasn't a second thought. He was in, and he stuck by her.
Mhm.
What about the father? Sam, you say you like the father?
I like the father. I think his character he was fatherly. He was doing everything that he thought he could do to help the war effort, but he also had some mental health issues that he was overcoming.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't really written into the book. A lot of that wasn't an issue, but he came out to be really like a sly fox. He was very concerned about his daughter, and he loved her dearly.
He did.
I like
Something.
Sarah, the ballerina. I love the
Sarah?
inclusion of the art in the middle of
Yes.
the war,
Mhm,
a
mhm.
ballet going on where they have to have blackout lights, and then the selection of Swan Lake where she's playing the two opposite
Yeah.
swans made you think of Paige and Claire at the end,
Mhm,
where
mhm.
they're two opposite people within one
Right.
person. So, and then I was so shocked when she came back alive.
Yes.
When we found out
Shocked
that
but happy.
yes, yeah. So I thought that was a nice twist in the story too.
Were you
I can
shocked
see.
when Paige came back alive?
No.
Oh, when Paige came, well, no, well, Paige was a mess. He didn't know it was better for her. Oh.
Let me read what Melody shared about her favorite second character. Actually, she had two. I enjoyed the camaraderie among David and John. They both were different in their friendship to Maggie, but they also looked out for her and protected her in their own way. You could feel the tension with John and his struggling with giving too much or too little information. David was just a genuine friend.
Mm-hmm.
She also liked Snodgrass and Sarah.
I did too.
Snodgrass had an air about him, but you also saw that he took everything in and understood more than surface.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah was just a good, rational friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what I was
one
going to say
character that I
earlier,
don't.
I could see Maggie and her father teaming up in future books to
Yes.
solve problems.
Yeah.
So that makes me want to even go read another one of those books because I want to see what happens between their relationship.
You got 10 more to go.
I know.
And she's
I
not
can-
spilling any tea,
Nope.
Vivian.
I
They
did
just
have a
get
least
better and
favorite
better.
character.
Okay, who was that?
My least favorite character, man, was that Simon. He was just so
Oh.
creepy. And I just think that's where a guy gets away with being creepy all the time. Everyone knew he was creepy. And he got, he got into all their circles just because he had gone to Oxford with them and he was good looking and, sly. But he was pretty creepy. Every time he came in the scene, it was kind of like, ugh.
Okay. All right. Any other second? No one said anything about the housemates. Who was your
Well,
favorite
I was going to
housemates? The
say something about
twins or Chuck?
well, the one that they didn't really explore her character that much was the and I can't remember her name, was the when they went to the farmhouse and the
Oh, the
lady
wife.
Oh, the one who got
Boy.
killed, the wife who got killed?
the
Yeah.
wife, yeah.
Mhm.
Her character was very interesting because I thought she had some integrity. She said, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this, and I'm
Right.
just not going to let you do what you plan on doing. And I thought that was an interesting character because usually if you've gone that far, you'll just okay. And she was a woman too. You just okay, well, she's got to die.
Mhm.
What about Chuck, the roommate, the nurse? She was a nurse. Did you think she
Yeah.
was like unconventional, one of the house roommates? I call her Chuck. I forgot her real name, but they called her Chuck
Charlotte.
in the house.
Charlotte.
Charlotte. Okay.
Yeah. She, and she was kind of depicted as being kind of big and clunky, but she had that boyfriend that, and she just seemed like a regular person, like somebody was, I mean, like she was probably the most normal of the people there. I didn't like the way that they called Annabelle and Clarabelle the Dingbells or Ding.
Oh.
Yeah. I didn't like that. Come on,
Right.
they kind of goofy, but and they were just like extra things too.
Yeah, they didn't spend much time on them in the book, in my
They didn't.
opinion, to really develop their characters enough for me to
Yeah.
like or
Annabelle
dislike
tried to
them.
move in on John at one point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I agree with you, Vivian. They just weren't as developed.
Right.
Correct. It's almost like, were they really necessary? It could have been like they were friends, the friends or the roommates. It's almost like there was a little bit of writing about them, but not enough to make them really any major or even minor characters in the book.
Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
I thought they
Are
would
they,
added a
gonna
little,
be in-
just a little bit of humor. Every time you saw their names, something a little bit lighthearted was about to
Lighthearted,
happen
that's true.
to lighten up the story a little bit.
I
But
kind of felt they were color.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, color,
Mhm.
Okay. So let's see. I think I've covered most of my questions. Do you guys have anything to add before I make a request that you rate the book from 5? I would read it again to down to 1. Okay. So do you have any last remarks about the book, Mr. Churchill's Secretary? Oh, we didn't talk about Mr. Churchill himself. How did he come across in this book?
Oh, he was funny.
Yeah,
I liked him.
she did when she goes to his house at the end and she
Yes.
talks about his coat of arms
Uh-huh.
and that the motto on it was, what was it? Faithful but not lucky.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, oh man, what do you do, if you meet a guy whose motto is I'm faithful but I'm not lucky? So I'm glad he's faithful, but do I want to get stuck with somebody who's unlucky their whole life?
Right.
Well, I liked Mr. Churchill, even though he was how can I put it, man of few words. But he was, to me, very caring, but he didn't want to show it.
Yeah, he acted a little
Yes.
stiff.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Well, I think that was the British in him, to act stiff. That was
Yes.
just kind of their nature.
I remember one part in the book where they said, somebody said, well, you know, we don't show emotions like that. I like Churchill because the depiction of his personality and his character is very reminiscent of how I thought he was just by looking at his pictures
Mm-hmm.
and hearing about him in history. So I saw that, and it was really cute to me how he would come in with it roughness and kicking over trash cans and all that other stuff and talking to Maggie in a kind of way. And then when she stood up herself and said, "You're not going to talk to me like that," he was like, "Oh, okay." So I really liked his
Yes.
character and his persona.
And Harriet, speaking of that scene from the book, do you think it was that little Aunt Edith came out and Maggie at that point when she stood up to him?
Absolutely. That was that, part where it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to really stand up for myself. So yeah, I saw that Edith coming out in her in that. Oh, absolutely.
And again, when she read the riot act to John, when she reminded him, "You aristocratic think because you're male, you got the door already open." She ripped him on one side and on the other. I think Edith came out again at training.
I think Edith got a taste of American women too. So she had that mix and passed it on to Maggie.
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's great. That's a good point. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, ladies,
And
thank you. Go ahead, Zadie.
Oh, I was just going to say, and Churchill's wife, she ruled.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
He did whatever she said.
Whatever
she was
said,
constantly
that's right.
reminding him to put the guardrails on. You can't talk to people like that.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, she was good. She
She was
kinda
almost like his
humanized him.
conscience.
Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
She kept him in line.
And the cat just had the run of the place.
Oh my
I
goodness.
know.
That was cat.
All right, ladies, let's rate the book and we'll turn it back over to Cindy.
I rated number 5. I would definitely read it again. It was a page turner. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
I did read it twice because
Oh,
I wanted to
okay.
make sure I remembered everything for today's meeting. So I just finished it a couple of days ago.
Okay.
For the second time. It was good. I rated a 5 too, if that's the highest.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
Most important thing is
I read it again. I would rate it a 5. I would read it again. Because there was a lot of things. It took a while to get into what I would call the good part of the book. The intrigue. So it took a while to get there. For me, it was good because I've been to the war rooms. I've seen where Churchill was in the war room. So a lot of the things that she was talking about, I could just kind of visualize having been there, and I could visualize St. Paul. Those are two places that I could visualize. So it made it just really come to life for me.
Awesome.
I would give it a 4. And primarily, it was a struggle in the beginning for me.
Yeah.
What's the struggle?
It was very, very slow. And a lot of times I said, I can't read this anymore. Then I go back. I said, no, I got to find out what happens. And then when you get to the good part, you say, okay. I was really starting to get into the book then. It was like, how come it couldn't speed up a little bit more? So that was the reason for the 4, not a 5.
For the same reasons, I would give it a 4+. It was a little slow at the beginning, but once I hit about midway, I couldn't stop. I exhausted the battery on one of my tablets and went and got the other one because I had to keep going to find out what happened. But I did enjoy it.
I think like Vivian, I reread the beginning of it, especially again to figure out where I was missing some of the clues. And so I don't know, probably a 4 because I don't know if I'd read it again, but it would make me want to read the next one.
Yes.
Now that I feel like I understand her a little bit better, and some of the things going on in her life and what made her, I'd like to see what would happen next to her.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
It was
I
a
probably
slow
prefer to go on to the next ones.
Yeah.
It
It
was
was
a
a
slow-
slow start for me also. on
Uh-huh.
there. But like you said, when she almost got to half of it, then it was really good, you know. So 4.5.
Yeah. Yeah, even though it started out with a murder, and you say, "Okay, what's
Yeah,
going
but it
on
was just
here?"
like,
You still had to build up to it, but it was a good read. It was really a good read. And okay, and even with all the different plots, it was, you had to keep, okay, what happened? Wait, we just switched
Exactly.
plots again, but it all came together. I like how she tied it all together at the end. So,
Mhm.
ladies, thank you again for reading the book, Mr. Churchill's Secretary. And like I said, there's 10 more Maggie Hope
10
books out
more?
there for you to enjoy. She wrote a total of 11.
How
Okay,
many have you
Wow.
read?
I have read 10 of them.
Okay.
okay.
Oof.
Yeah, yeah. She wrote
Is her
this one in
father in all of them?
2012. This is her first one that she wrote in 2012. And the
Okay.
last one she wrote last year in 2024.
Okay.
All right, I turn it back over to Cindy.
All right, Linda, thank you for a fabulous book club. We enjoyed Mr. Churchill's Secretary, and hats off to you for choosing another phenomenal book for women on the move. So we hope all of you enjoyed it. Thank you for tuning in.